we're going to be talking all about propellers. Propellers have a couple key points to them. There's actually four main things that go into a propeller. You have pitch, diameter, number of blades, and fixed or folding. Diameter. The bigger the propeller, the bigger the diameter it is, the more water it's going to push and the more power it's going to have. But the way to look at it as well is the more power it's going to take to move that large propeller. So if you have a very large, powerful engine, you can turn a giant propeller. Like if you look at a tugboat or a commercial ship, those propellers are huge. They're feet across. And then you have a day sailor with a small gasoline engine, or your outboard. It's going to have a tiny little propeller because it's a small motor. So if it had a large diameter propeller to try and turn, it just can't do it. Pitch. Now pitch is the angle of the blade, and the number that's given for pitch is how many inches the propeller will travel in one full rotation. So if you think about it, it's at an angle as it turns and moves through space. That distance with zero slippage is the pitch, the number of blades. So obviously more blades, more surface area, more bite, and then more go. As you go increasing the number of blades, you go increasing the amount of power that you'll get out of the propeller. When you're motoring, you want more blades because that gives you more push and more thrust. When you're sailing, those extra blades are extra drag. So in those situations, you actually want fewer blades because then you have less drag. And if you have a full keel boat with a propeller in an aperture, 2 blades is actually the best if you want better sailing performance. So you can see here, the propeller hides behind the keel. So when you're sailing along, the propeller is hidden and there's no drag from it. If you had 3 blades, no matter how you position it, you're always going to have 2 blades sticking out. The last thing is fixed or folding. So a fixed propeller is just that. It doesn't change shape, it is fixed. A folding propeller is one that the blades will actually turn and move. And then those come in a couple things. You have the feathering and then the folding type. But we'll get to those later. So if we look here, this is a rather large sailboat, and you can see a rather large propeller. And the angle of the blade that it's running here, that is the pitch. So imagine if the propeller does 1 full revolution forward, the distance it travels is the pitch. Now this propeller also has 3 blades, and it is a fixed propeller. So you can see it's cast bronze and it's in that direction, and that's all it does. Now an interesting thing to note, this propeller is a left-handed propeller because it rotates counterclockwise. By contrast, this propeller is a right-handed propeller because it spins clockwise. Now clockwise, counterclockwise, right hand, left hand, it doesn't make a difference in going. The difference comes in prop walk. So what prop walk is when you are moving at slow speeds and you spin your propeller, the direction that you actually end up creeping. So this is very apparent when you're going reverse because that's when people are most attuned to anything other than what they want to have happen. And prop walk is when your stern scoots either to starboard or to port. And the easy way to think of this is left-handed propellers walk to starboard, right-handed propellers walk to port. Now, why would someone not want a fixed propeller? Why would you want something else? Why wouldn't you want a propeller that works to push your boat? Well, it's simple. When you're sailing, you're not motoring. And when you're not motoring, those blades, and the more of them, the more drag they create. That is where feathering and folding type propellers come into play.
Well, this guy's seized up, so that's not going to happen.
So here you can see the propeller just folds down and it's completely blind. This is very, very little drag in the water, and then when you need power, the blades open up. So that gives you the ability to have a lot of blades, a lot of surface area of your blades, but then when you're sailing, they just fold away and they're out of the way, and then you don't have to worry about drag or any issues like that. As you can see, when a propeller folds, it's still kind of bulky. It's not completely gone. And that is what brings us to feathering propellers. So a feathering propeller, instead of folding and trying to get out of the way, just lets go. So the idea with folding is they fold to be less obtrusive, less drag, and less in the way. The problem is they're still in the way. They don't really go away completely. So that's the idea behind feathering, is if you can just turn the blades to not be creating drag, then you'll have a lot less drag and you'll sail faster. Now that's the idea with feathering propeller. So this here is a bronze feathering propeller, and you can see as it turns, it becomes a good propeller. It's got some really thick blades that offer a lot of surface area, and then when it spins, it feathers, and it goes completely blind to the water. So this gives you the ability to have a lot of propeller area, and then when you're sailing, it just goes away. It is shaped to be incredibly hydrodynamic. I mean, this thing, when it's feathered, it's practically no drag. In some positions, now this being a 2-blade is really good. The 3-blade varieties, they always have a blade that's sticking out horizontally, and whatever the angle of the prop shaft is, that blade's going to be dragging in the water. Which, that brings us to the Kiwi Props. So you can see here, the blades on this Kiwi Prop, each can turn independently. So the propeller is mounted at quite a steep angle, so if you were to have the propeller be folding or something like that, it's still going to be folded at a weird angle. But with the Kiwi Prop, you're able to actually set, well, each blade feathers independently, so it'll simply sit in a way that it is the least drag possible. Now, a really interesting thing with Kiwi Props, and we actually looked at them because I think they're awesome, except they have one huge flaw that I cannot get behind. So, the things that are awesome is they are very inexpensive. They work really well, and they are planned to be disposable. So what I mean by that is they only cost a couple $100, where the other kinds that are cast bronze cost thousands of dollars. So pretty much whatever your price for a different company of folding or feathering, just chop off a zero, and there's your Kiwi Prop price. So if you're looking at one that's say $4,000, you can expect to pay $400 along those lines. It's an insane discount. And then the other thing is, since they're so cheap, they don't last very long. They actually die. With good maintenance, they'll last longer, but they usually last a few years, and then they die. But you know that. So when you buy the Kiwi Prop, you know it's going to die, and you're not astounded at the fact that it dies. When people buy these like thousands of dollar propellers, they think it's going to last the rest of their life. And then it doesn't. And then they're all disheartened and just, what happened? I thought this would last forever. So knowing that you're going to be replacing it and paying less multiple times, to me, is better than paying a whole lot once, thinking it'll last the rest of your life, and then being astounded when it doesn't. The reason I cannot get behind Kiwi Props is the blades are made of plastic, and the blades actually wear down over time. And they wear down because they actually polish off. So debris that's in the water running past them actually scrubs the propeller blades down until they just wear down to little nubbins. At that point, you just replace the blades. But what that means is you have dumped all that plastic into the ocean. I can't get behind that. That just, it irks me so much. This is all well and good with diesel-powered boats, where you have a strong mechanical propulsion system that's goal is to push you through the water, and then when you're sailing, to go out of the way and just not be a thing anymore, and then you don't have to worry about it. What happens with, say, an electric drive? So in our case, where the propeller actually spins the motor when we're sailing and produces power for regen, feathering and folding sounds like it'd be the worst thing for us, because when you start sailing, yes, the propeller becomes blind to the water, and then it's less drag, and you'll sail faster, but you won't get the power from your regen, which well, we really like our regen power. It's like a nice little bonus. We don't count on it, but it's really nice when we get it. Now, what do you do there? Well, a lot of the manufacturers of propellers realize that electric drive is becoming a lot more popular. A lot of boats are actually being manufactured with electric motors from factory, not being aftermarket refits like what we did on our boat. So they realize that if they don't change with the times, they're not going to have a new market. So they've actually set up a lot of systems where you can actually force the propeller to be locked in position and not feather, and then you have regen while still having your folding prop when you don't want regen anymore. Now with electric drive, the amount of power that you can create comes from the propeller working backwards. Instead of being a propeller pushing the water, now it's a fan catching the water. So now all the parts of the propellers are looked at from a different light, because before you're looking at them like, all right, how can I make the propeller as unobtrusive as possible on the sailboat? So you want to have as few blades as possible, and tiny blades, a really tiny diameter propeller. That way it's not much drag. What happens if you now have an electric drive and you no longer view the propeller as the source of drag, but instead as a source of power? So when you're sailing, all those factors now play in reverse, and that leads to what you want in electric drives. So for electric drives, the larger the diameter, the larger the lever arm is torquing on the propeller shaft, which is feeding your motor to give you regen power. So having a larger diameter propeller all of a sudden gives you a lot more power for regen. Second, more blades means more contact with the water, more surface area, and then more bite. So then as you go through the water, there's less slippage, and the propeller will actually be pushed better by the water that's rushing past it. So if you have a two-blade propeller that can hide blind behind your keel, all of a sudden you're not going to be creating any regen at all if the propeller happens to be hiding behind the keel. Where having a three-blade propeller gives you the advantage that you will always have two blades sticking out to the sides of your keel. Lastly, the pitch. That affects how fast the propeller is going to be spinning as it's dragged through the water. So the steeper the pitch, the less it's going to spin. So if you look at it from a power standpoint of thrust from the motor, having a greater pitch will allow you to go faster at lower RPMs for your motor. But then on the inverse, when you're trying to create power with regen, you're going to have a slower spinning propeller, so it's not going to create as much power. So having a lower pitch number will cause the propeller to spin faster, which will then produce more power. But likewise, in order for the boat to reach hull speed, your propeller is going to have to be spinning really fast because it has a really small pitch. With feathering, folding, or fixed, the style of the blades, a fixed propeller is the least complicated. It is cast in its shape to work. As you sail through the water fast, its blades are creating a lot of resistance, which are turning the propeller, which turns the propeller shaft, which turns your motor, which produces power. As you throw in feathering and folding systems, now there's a lot more moving parts. Stuff starts to fail, it breaks, and then your propeller doesn't work. And the last thing you want is to be coming into a marina and find out that your propeller doesn't work right now. A note on propeller walk, also called prop walk. It seems to be this mysterious thing that catches new sailors off guard, and even seasoned boaters. When you don't want it, it's gonna be there, and when you're counting on it to work, it doesn't seem to show up. So, an easy way to think about prop walk is this. The propeller is walking. If the propeller spins clockwise, it's going this way. It's gonna walk that way. If the propeller spins counterclockwise, it's gonna walk that way. That is it. Now, there's a whole bunch of theories, and some of them are conflicting, some of them sound like they would make a lot of sense as to why prop walk happens. One of them is the water at the higher side of the propeller, so the top blade, is less dense, so therefore has less bite on the propeller, and the water deeper, so the lower blade, is more dense and has more bite on the propeller, and that causes the dissimilar forces, and then it walks to one side. The simplest way to test what prop walk you have is to be tied up in your slip and put the motor in reverse and give it a lot of throttle. That's it. And then you're going to get off of your boat, and this is why you have to make sure it's tied up well, and you're going to look at the water that's moving around your boat. So you have to do this on a really calm, tranquil day. Now, if you see a whole lot of prop wash on your port side and very little on your starboard, you know that your propeller is throwing a lot of its thrust to port. If it's throwing it to port, then the boat, by, virtue of physics, is going to walk to starboard. If it's throwing a whole bunch of prop wash to starboard and a little bit to port, you know that it's going to walk to port. That's it. So you don't really have to memorize, right-handed propellers walk this way, or left-handed walk that way, or how many blades. Don't worry about that stuff. Test your own boat, see what it does, and off you go. Now, a really interesting thing, though, which is really annoying about prop walk, when you're at rest and you put it in high gear, like full speed and in reverse, it's going to walk either port or starboard. And whatever it is for your boat, that's what you're going to have happen. Now, if you're moving forward and then you throw it in reverse, it's going to walk opposite. it's gonna happen. So it works really well. That's actually why we always dock on our port side when we tie up places, or try to if we can, because as we come in and we're moving forward towards the pier, we throw it in reverse, and then the prop walk actually scoots our stern into port, and then we tie up on the port side. When we want to leave, we're stopped, we're stationary. We throw it in reverse, and the prop walk walks us to starboard, and then it pulls the stern off of the pier. So that's a little trick where a lot of people would have a lot of problems when they know for a fact 100% sure that their boat is going to walk to starboard, and then they throw it in reverse, and then they walk to port, and they have no idea what just happened. It catches everyone off guard, and just knowing that it's going to happen helps make your life a whole lot easier for when it does happen. So some things about prop walk. Now, I must say, figure out what your boat does, and then know how to work your own boat. But these are some generalities that affect prop walk. So one thing is the angle of the propeller shaft. So the steeper the angle, the more prop walk you're going to have. Second, what's around the propeller. If the propeller is encased in an aperture, it's going to have some nasty prop walk. If it's out in the open, it's going to have a lot less prop walk. What other appendages are near it? So if the propeller's like smack up, tucked behind the keel, even if it's not in an aperture or really close to the rudder, stuff like that, apparently that'll also give it more prop walk, where if it's just hanging out alone underneath the boat, a lot less prop walk. And then the last thing, which you actually have control over, is the RPM of the propeller. So if the propeller is spinning faster, it will have more prop walk. If it's spinning slower, less prop walk. So if you are in a slip and you want to back out nice and straight, don't put it in full reverse. If you do that, you're going to walk either port or starboard. If you put it in a light reverse, like just in gear and very light throttle, you'll have a lot less prop walk. And then you'll be able to actually move aft a lot better. Now, prop walk is a thing until the boat is moving fast enough that then the rudder and the keel and everything can then take effect, and you'll have steerage. But at first, when you have not enough motion to have steerage on your rudder, prop walk is going to be what steers you. Now, prop walk does exist going forward, but usually when you're moving forward, you're in a big open area, and you get up to speed where you have enough steerage right away, like pretty quickly. So that's why people don't tend to notice it when they're motoring forward. But if your prop walks, whatever your propeller walks to stern when you're in reverse, it's going to be the opposite direction of prop walk when you're moving forward. From a theoretical standpoint, if you think about it, if you're going to be moving a mile dead ahead and you walk to starboard in reverse, that means that you're going to end up a little bit to port from straight ahead of a mile. That's just getting into technicalities, and that is why power boats that have two propellers have counter rotation propellers. So one prop goes right hand, the other one's left hand. And the reason is if they rotate opposite, it cancels out the prop walk, and then you'll move more in a straight line. So for sailboat, where the primary form of power is sails, prop walk's not that big a deal going forward. For a motorboat, where they 100% rely on that engine to get them there, it's nice to go straight ahead. What's so awesome about a sail drive is it can be located anywhere. You don't need to have the straight line access for the motor, for the shaft to run. And most importantly, the propeller is set perfectly horizontal. There is no angulation to the propeller shaft because everything is just hanging down there. And then what's even better is there's nothing around the propeller. There's no shaft leading to it. There's no struts. You don't have to be coming out of the keel or something. It literally just hangs down under the boat. So it can hang in completely unobstructed water, have a large propeller because the longer the sail drive hangs down, the more open the space is. So all of that allows you to have a beautiful open propeller that hangs down quite low under the boat, and all the thrust, it can be mounted really far from the keel and far from the rudder. So all the thrust just happens, and you'll have almost no prop walk at all. That's really awesome. Sadly, not all boats have sail drives. We can wish though. So obviously you can tell from this, if you have a diesel powered boat and you're trying to create as much thrust and have as little prop walk as possible, a sail drive to a large folding propeller or feathering would be ideal, because you'll have all the power when you need it, and then when you don't, the propeller blades just go away. If you are looking to create a lot of power to charge your electric motor through regen, then you're going to want a large propeller, where if you're looking for reliability, you're going to go for a fixed blade. If you're looking for performance, you'll go with a folding or feathering. So there were 3 main reasons why we decided to stay with a fixed blade propeller on our own boat, which has an electric motor. Even though we've sailed thousands of miles when we crossed an ocean and we've been to all sorts of places, and we decided to use a fixed 3-blade propeller instead of spending a little bit more and buying ourselves a brand new folding or feathering propeller. 1, a fixed blade will always work because it's there. 2, there's the cost. We already had a fixed blade. Buying a feathering would have been pretty expensive. And honestly, I wish Kiwi came in bronze. All I'm going to say on that. So much wish. And then lastly is the amount of drag that you actually get from a non-folding propeller, from a fixed blade. So I looked at the racing modern day handicap rules. They have been exceedingly scientific about what changes the performance on a boat. So you have your base boat, and then any little modifications you've made, they have handicap ratings that say how many seconds are added or taken away per mile or per hour, however the unit was. They've looked into this so much, and a fixed 3-blade propeller in an aperture, it was something like 20 seconds per mile. It was so low, and I'm sorry, but I just couldn't justify the cost of spending thousands of dollars for a propeller that was going to save us 20 seconds per mile. At 1,000 miles, that's a little under 6 hours saved. We're not racing, so if we cross an ocean and it takes us an extra 12 hours, I mean, so what? It's not a big deal. If you're racing, then it makes a difference. But for us, since we're not racing and we're just taking it easy, the reliability of a fixed blade and the cost savings of not having to buy a new propeller is what made us choose to stay with a fixed propeller. If we were to buy one, man, those Kiwis are nice. If only they'd stop dumping plastic in the ocean. Oh, that's all I gotta say. I hope you guys enjoyed this video on all about propellers. If you guys have any questions, please let us know. And I'd love to hear from you guys. If you guys have folding propellers or feathering propellers, how do you like them? Did you have a fixed blade before? Did you notice a difference? And lastly, what's been your history with maintenance on them? Have you found them to be problematic, or are they just worry-free? They just work? I'd love to know, because I really like feathering propellers. I just think they're awesome. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends.
And if you'd like to follow our journey in real time on a map, receive postcards from our ports of call, and message us directly to the boat, you can go ahead and become a patron using the link in the description down below.